On today's episode of the JB Podcast, yeah, super teams are not over. Bradley Beal is in Phoenix, a huge shocker on Father's Day. We're going to get into it, as well as some other trade stuff, NBA rumors, and a little rant at the end about New York baseball. Coming up next on the JB Podcast. So, folks, it has been a long time, I think, since we've seen an owner come in for a franchise and make these significant moves. I mean, you could argue the Kevin Durant trade itself was one of the biggest NBA trades ever, maybe the biggest NBA trade ever. And then they're getting Bradley Beal for absolutely nothing. I mean, I didn't even think Phoenix was in the conversation for Bradley Beal. This is like 3 days ago. I thought it was going to come down to Miami, and the Knicks were another team I thought of. I didn't think of anything else. I didn't believe in the Bucks. I didn't think that made any sense. I was like, are they going to get rid of Drew Holiday or Middleton? I mean, Middleton's a free agent, so you can't do that. So I have no idea. I really just thought Miami was going to be them, and then when I saw that they didn't want to give up Tyler Hero, I was like, classic Miami, because they're always stingy with their trades. They always try to give you as few as possible, and I mean few as physically possible. And I think, like, I just kind of said, all right, Beal's going to Miami, it looks like that. And then all of a sudden, Shams reports it's coming down to Miami and Phoenix. And I was like, oh, okay. I did not consider Phoenix at all there. And I'm thinking, okay, what goes in that trade? Is it Ayton? Is it Chris Paul and Ayton? And I knew the return for Beal wasn't going to be much. But I figured Washington would want at least a first-round pick in a trade. And from the Miami standpoint, the reported offer was, I think, Kyle Lowry, Duncan Robinson, and 2 first-round picks. I think that was the trade. And Bradley Beal said no, because he has a no-trade clause. And we're going to get into the stupidity of Tommy Shepard, the previous Wizards GM, and giving him that contract later, and the Washington Wizards in general, where they go from here, all that stuff. But Bradley Beal had the option. He had the option to choose where he wanted to go. And where did he go? He went with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. Now, you saw Joseph Nurkic, which, Nurkic tweeting is annoying because, he quite frankly talks a lot of stuff, and he really ain't that good. But he basically tweeted out, it's the Brooklyn Nets Big Three all over again. I have some thoughts on that. But first, I'm going to talk about the Phoenix fit and what I thought about the Bradley Beal trade in general. Here's my thoughts on Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal, I think, is one of the most overrated players in the NBA today. I think he's not nearly as good as people think. And I think some people, are saying, Beal, some people think Beal is underrated because of the big contract he was given. People think he's bad. Bradley Beal is a really good player. He hasn't been an all-star in a while, and he hasn't been healthy, and he hasn't been shooting his threes that well lately. Could be because he's getting less catch-and-shoot opportunities. If he plays with a guy like Devin Booker, if he plays with a guy like Kevin Durant, he's going to get way more opportunities for catch-and-shoot threes, and he'll probably make more of them. No doubt about that. Beal's playmaking is probably a little underrated. But I look at Bradley Beal, and I look at the Wizards team last year, right? Now, listen, that Wizards team was nothing special. Nothing special. But if you look at their team of individual talent, are you telling me they couldn't at least have a shot in the play-in tournament? Are you telling me they're, way worse than Chicago when it comes to, talent? Or whoever was or Toronto? In regards to talent, if Beal is as good as he is, or that contract makes him out to be, Kristaps Porzingis had a really good season last year, and he was mostly healthy. right? Kyle Kuzma had a really good year last year. I don't think that coach is an imbecile, right? Daniel Gafford's a nice player. Like, they have nice players. Like Monte Morris, solid guard, right? If Bradley Beal's as good as we all think, I don't know, like, maybe make the play-in, and maybe they do make the play-in if he doesn't get injured, which he has been injured. And he's about to hit 30, and that year where he averaged 30 points per game is now a few years ago. So you're taking the one thing Beal does well, which is offense. He's been a bad defender for a while now. And listen, when you're the best player on a team, it's hard to be this top-tier defender and be the number one offensive player. It just is, right? Beal was a better defender when he was playing with John Wall, when less of the load was on him. When John Wall left and more of the load was on him, he had to, be a better offensive player, took a lot of energy there, and then didn't play as much defense. Here's the thing. I think people are talking about Phoenix as if they've made this huge mistake. And I don't necessarily see it that way, and I'll tell you why. Because look who they gave up, right? They gave up Chris Paul, they gave up Landry Shamet, and they gave up second-round picks. They were just talking about possibly waiving Chris Paul last week, and they got Bradley Beal instead. And Landry Shamet, I know he had moments in the playoffs where he looked really good. Ultimately, I think Landry Shamet stinks, personally. I've seen him play on my team. I understand he had moments where he had shots, but he's like a three-point shooter who really can't shoot threes consistently, and it's irritating. If you're, so them upgrading from Shamet and Chris Paul to Bradley Beal is a no-brainer to me. To me, they made this decision once they traded for Kevin Durant. They're like, once they went all in for Kevin Durant, they throw in Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. You see how well those guys are doing in Brooklyn now with expanded roles. They traded every first-round pick imaginable, and they had no first-round picks. So the fact that they really didn't have many options to upgrade the roster. Nobody wants DeAndre Ayton. No one wanted Chris Paul in that massive contract. Well, you got Bradley Beal. So ultimately, it's a good trade for Phoenix. However, there is a difference between, assets. Yeah, they gave up these assets for this asset. And ultimately, do I think they're going to win the championship? The question is no. I don't think this team is going to win the championship. That doesn't mean I don't think this is a bad, do I think they can win the championship? Sure, they can win the championship. But these guys, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, let's look at them individually. Devin Booker, I believe, is one of probably a top 10 player in the league right now. I think Devin Booker's made a big jump last year, and it's his team, and he's going to be the guy. And it wouldn't shock me if he surpasses the player Kevin Durant is next year in some people's eyes. It just wouldn't shock me. Because he's going to have to be a distributor and really kind of take over the offense. Kevin Durant could play with anybody, right? He could play with any player ever. That's his game, right? And Bradley Beal proved he could play with somebody like John Wall, a guy who handles the ball a lot, guy who could be a good off-ball player. So the assumption is Devin Booker's going to play a lot of point, and Beal and Durant are going to play off it. It looks like they're going to keep Ayton. I recently saw Shams talk on the Pat McAfee show saying that they've received calls on DeAndre Ayton. I don't know what they would get for DeAndre Ayton. All I know is DeAndre Ayton has kind of complained about not getting the ball in the last few years. Now he's definitely not getting the ball. Definitely not. There's no way. Someone has to sacrifice, and honestly, Beal is going to have to sacrifice significantly. Wouldn't be shocked if Beal's averaging like 17 points per game this year. He averaged 23 last season, and a few years ago, he was averaging 28 to 30. He's going to probably be averaging 17 points per game. It'll be a catch-and-shoot guy. Hopefully, he makes threes at a higher clip. I mean, hopefully Kevin Durant plays more than 40 games, and hopefully Devin Booker stays healthy for the full season. Devin Booker was not healthy all of last year, missed a significant amount. of time, right? And listen, Chris Paul's never healthy in the playoffs. It's just that simple. Chris Paul is never that healthy. And there was no question they had to move on from Chris Paul, but it was hard to move on from Chris Paul because you couldn't find a suitor. Well, that's why the Beal trade made sense for Phoenix. Now, Phoenix is screwed and has screwed draft pick-wise. They have no draft picks. They have no outs on making this deal. This is their team. It's Bradley Beal. It's Kevin Durant. It's Devin Booker. It kind of reminds me of when Westbrook was traded to the Lakers, but like a much better version of that. We all knew Westbrook was a clunky fit. I think these three can fit together okay because they can all dribble, pass, and shoot. However, the difference is, or the similarity is between these two, is the Lakers basically signed a bunch of old vet minimum $1 million players to fill out the rest of the roster, like Carmelo Anthony, Wayne Ellington. They got back Dwight Howard, DeAndre Jordan. Like, that was the rest of the team. And they really were banking on Westbrook, Davis, and LeBron working, and of course it didn't. Westbrook and LeBron is a clunky fit. And poor Frank Vogel was the coach of that team, is going to have to coach this team now. He's a defensive-minded coach. This team has no defense on it right now. Kevin Durant's your best defender. And as good as I think Durant can be as a defender, he can't be the best defender. I mean, that's a big problem. So I assume Phoenix is they're going to have Cameron Payne, they're going to have Jack Londale, maybe they'll do some sort of, maybe they'll bring back Torrey Craig, maybe Josh Okogie, I have no idea. But they're going to have to find people to fill out this roster, and the league is so talented, I don't know if Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant is enough to really overcome that. And people are comparing this to the Brooklyn Nets Big Three disaster, right? And obviously, I know that team very well. I know what didn't work. I know what did work. Here's the thing. If those people think the Brooklyn Nets Big Three didn't work as a basketball team on the court, they're wrong. They're just flat out wrong. The team went 13-3 together. 2 of those games, I think Durant had to leave early because of a COVID situation, if you remember. The other one was their first game together. And I'm not sure what the third one was, but it was not a lot of games, right? So, KD, Kyrie, and Harden were great together. They just couldn't stay on the floor. It's that simple. So if you think that didn't work because they were all scorers or whatever, listen, that isn't it. The reason why that worked is because James Harden was excellent at playmaking, right? He was a great passer, right? So he could sacrifice his elite scoring ability at the time. And remember, James Harden was elite when he first got to Brooklyn. Not the next year where he started off with a hamstring injury and was significantly worse, like fat and out of shape. When he first got to Brooklyn, he still had that explosiveness to get by people. He set up people all the time, lobs to guys like Nick Claxton. Nick Claxton got a good jump on his career playing with James Harden. I mean, he even made Reggie Perry, if you remember his name at all, look semi-decent, right? And people knew DeAndre Jordan was cooked in the league when James Harden couldn't make old DeAndre Jordan look good. Okay? It's that simple. So Harden made guys look great on that Brooklyn team because he was an elite passer. Kevin Durant could play with anybody, as we know. And then Kyrie could be that third guy, explosive scorer. He was also great at playing off the ball. Now, I'm not saying Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant are incapable of playing well off the ball. I'm just not sure they're any type of playmaker like James Harden was. And to me, James Harden was really the glue that made it work. And here's the thing, too. Injuries. Why did the Nets make that James Harden trade? At the time, Harden was one of the most durable players in the league. He played almost every regular season game. So even though Durant had injury issues, Kyrie had injury issues, James Harden could come in and carry a team for a night. So you're hoping Beal can do that. You're hoping Booker can do that, right? But here's the thing. In the playoffs, in some regular season games, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, there's going to be times where they're going to be playing 40 minutes a night, especially Durant. because the team around them is just not going to be there. And the defense isn't going to be there. They're going to be exhausted trying to keep up scoring all the time. I just don't buy that this team is a championship winner. Because, okay, did that Brooklyn Nets Big Three have depth? Yes, they did, actually. Sean Marks did a great job filling out that roster. Could you imagine if Spencer Dinwiddie was actually healthy? Because they didn't give him up, right? They gave up Karis LeVert and Jared Allen. Okay, that's who they gave up. You know who they also had on that team by playoff time? Blake Griffin did the best job guarding Giannis Antetokounmpo in the playoffs that year and showed an offensive ability to be a stretch five. Jeff Green was awesome that year for the Nets, okay? Actually got increased pay when he went into the offseason and signed with the Denver Nuggets. Bruce Brown was on that team. Look at where Bruce Brown is now. And by the way, Bruce Brown has improved, no doubt, but he was really good 2 years ago as well. He wasn't just a bum that went to Denver and played well in Denver. Like, he's been pretty much consistently good for the last 3 years. 4 years, I would say. Even that year in Detroit, he showed signs of being really excellent for them. So, that team had Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, a veteran Blake Griffin that was playing good at the time. Landry Shamet, who I made fun of before, was like the 9th guy. And Joe Harris, even though he stunk in that Bucks series as a shooter, led the league in three-point percentage that season. He wasn't a bum. Wasn't a squat. It wasn't just a complete scrub of a basketball player. So you look back at that Nets team. I don't know. They had guys. They had a young Nick Claxton. Who was there? They had guys, and I could be forgetting more people, but that's a legit few guys they had to go with Kyrie, Harden, and KD. So Phoenix doesn't have any of that. Phoenix doesn't have a Bruce Brown. Phoenix doesn't have a Jeff Green who was playing really well at that level. They could get guys in the buyout market, but they didn't really get anybody great in the buyout market this year, and that's after the Kevin Durant trade. Right? When people thought they were for sure going to walk to a title with Chris Paul and Ayton. There's legitimate concerns of how Ayton's role and if he's going to be happy with it. So while I think Phoenix making this Beal trade, I think is the move that they should have done, it better work. And you better hope that Beal is productive at that contract as a third guy. You better hope KD's healthy. Because let's face it, the last 2 years in the playoffs now, we've seen Durant struggle with physicality. We've seen it. So now he's going to be having to play 40 minutes a night still, probably. He's probably going to get hurt again. Say what you want about Kevin Durant versus Mikal Bridges. We know Durant's a better player. At least Mikal Bridges played 82 games a year and was a role of consistency for Phoenix. Now, that team Phoenix had with Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and Chris Paul and Devin Booker, you can argue their depth wasn't that great either. Like, their depth wasn't amazing, right? They still had Cam Payne playing a lot of minutes for them. They still had Shamet playing a lot of minutes for them. But they had, you can argue that was the case. Here's the thing. Mikal Bridges played 82 games a year. Kevin Durant is elite. He's going to play 45 to 50. And Beal, that's basically what he's played the last 3 years. It's going to be a lot of Devin Booker, and you better hope Devin Booker doesn't get injured carrying that load. And Frank Vogel, who I think is a good coach, and I think he got a raw deal with the Lakers, is one of the most hilarious fires. They just blamed it all on him when Darvin Ham comes in, and it was clear that even though I thought Darvin Ham did a good job the second half of the year, it was just clear Westbrook was a bad fit, and no coach could have fixed that. So Frank Vogel's a good coach. However, he's in a very similar position here, where he has a top star-studded roster, and he's going to have really no one else. And he's got to build a defense with that. And he's not the best offensive mind with coaching. Doesn't have LeBron out there to help him. Now, he does have Durant, he does have Booker, he does have Bradley Beal. All three super skilled offensive players. We get it. You better hope they're healthy. And you better hope that they can play and really gel together. Because that Phoenix team is so top-heavy. They have nothing behind those guys. Nothing. So their management, their front office is going to have to find diamonds in the rough because that team, it literally doesn't have anybody other than Kevin Durant. I think 4 guys are under contract. It's Ayton, Booker, Beal, and Durant. Right? And I think they're getting more players in the Wizards trade. I think they're getting some other guys. But that's really my thoughts on Phoenix. And when we compare it to the big 3, it's funny. And just a quick thought on super teams. Listen, super teams are going to be around. They're just going to be around. I mean, Miami's trying to do it with Lillard. They're trying to pair Butler and Bam with Damian Lillard. So these rules are going to really, they're going to try and do away with the super teams. We'll see if they affect it to a significant level. But ultimately, the top 3 players on a basketball team, of a championship team, are usually all-stars or all-star capable guys. And we call them super teams anyway. People talk about the Brooklyn Nets with Joe Johnson, Darren Williams, Brook Lopez, like that was a big 3 back in 2012. Like people just refer to anything as a big 3, I feel. So in regards to that, that's always going to be in the league. But listen, in Phoenix's favor, in Phoenix fans' favor, I do think you should be excited. But this owner, man, he is making moves left and right. And from going with the cheapest owner in NBA history in Robert Sarver, I think, maybe Donald Sterling has something to say about that too, but Robert Sarver is one of the cheapest owners ever. Horrible guy, right? And then you get this guy, Matt Ishbia, who's trading everything for guys. And Isaiah Thomas is in his ear. I don't know how real that is, but I don't know why you'd listen to Isaiah Thomas for management decisions. He's literally one of the worst executives ever. This trade for Phoenix better work. It's really that simple. And if it doesn't, they're going to pay for it a lot. Because, the Nets had the benefit of the doubt. Like, if this KD, Kyrie, Harden thing didn't work out, those guys were still young enough to where they could get good value and good picks for them. KD's 35. Booker's going to have a lot of value for sure if things don't work out and if he possibly wants out. But Beal and Durant are going to have probably no value. It's just probably the case. If this, I'm just saying, if this goes 3 years later, I mean, Durant would be 37 at that point. So that's just important to know. I mean, and to get to Washington, Tommy Shepard, how do you get Bradley Beal a $250 million contract with a no-trade clause? How do you do that? Everyone knew the Wizards should have traded Bradley Beal 2-3 years ago. Everybody knew it. It's the same thing that's going on with Dame in Portland. Luckily, they didn't sign him to a no-trade clause, although his contract is really tough to look at and stomach in a few years. Bradley Beal is not even an all-star right now. He's an all-star caliber player. We sure he's going to make a Western Conference all-star team at this point? I don't think so. So, you look at Bradley Beal. Yeah, he's loyal to Washington, all that stuff. Let's face it, he wanted to get that bag. He wanted to get that money. That is why he stuck it out in Washington. He's like, this team is dumb enough to give me a $250 million Supermax contract. Okay, and DC's a nice area. I like living here. But let's face it, that's the reason. And not only that, they give him a no-trade clause, which means he vetoes any trade that actually could help you get assets. Right? So, I said, right before he was announced to go to Phoenix, I said in a tweet that it makes no sense for Washington to accept the Phoenix offer because they probably want at least the first or 2 first-round picks. So even though Lowry and Duncan Robinson, are not, appealing players to get back in a Beal trade, you're trading to get those picks and you're unloading the contract. That's basically it. And Bradley Beal didn't want to go to Miami. He'd rather went to go to Phoenix. Right? And Kevin Durant, just a hooper, I might add, was recruiting him. So, it's a situation for Washington where the new management comes in and they probably did the best they could have done, right, with this deal. Because Bradley Beal was going to go where he wanted to go. and they had no other option. The whole point is they got this contract off their books and now they can tank and rebuild. But they should have done this a year ago. There's no Victor Wembanyama in this next draft. They could have done this a year ago, bottomed out, tanked for Victor, had all these assets for Beal, from Beal, right? And just start over. Because it was clear they weren't going anywhere. It was clear Beal wasn't going to recruit anyone better to get guys in DC. And it was clear that Beal wasn't that guy. So for Washington getting back what they got, Chris Paul's definitely not staying there. He probably goes to LA, either the Clippers or the Lakers. I personally like Chris Paul and the Lakers. I know there's been a lot of rumors that he's probably going to go to the Clippers. I like Westbrook's fit with the Clippers. I think he provides a lot of consistency and durability that they really need. So I like him on the Clippers. Chris Paul, I'd like to see him play with LeBron, and even though their games kind of don't mesh that much because LeBron needs the ball in his hands a lot, I think Chris Paul has proven he could play with guys who handle the ball a lot. He's done that in Houston, even though they butted heads a lot. I mean, LeBron and Chris Paul are friends, but him and Harden butted heads. And Booker needs the ball in his hands a lot too, and Chris Paul worked well with Devin Booker. So I think if you have a pick and roll partner, if Davis has two pick and roll partners with LeBron and Chris Paul, I think that could work. And listen, say what you want about Chris Paul. It's at this age, he'd probably be an upgrade over what D'Angelo Russell gave them in the playoffs this year. So you can complain about his durability, but to me, if he's waived, you could take a flyer out on him. To me, with the Clippers, I mean, what is Westbrook coming off the bench now, or is Chris Paul coming off the bench, or do they move on from Russell Westbrook and then they bring Chris Paul in there, so they get another guy in there that doesn't really play a lot of games when it matters? I don't know. I just don't like him on the Clippers. The other team I would have liked him in is Boston, but again, because it seemed like they lack a point guard that can really set things up. And you could argue that coaching is more why Boston didn't go to the finals this year, and they were lacking in that department. But Chris Paul being there could be very helpful for Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. It looks like Boston is going to pay Jaylen Brown. It looks like that's what they're focused on. I thought Jaylen Brown would be out of there personally, either by trade or free agency next year, but who knows? And with the new CBA, maybe Boston doesn't want to pay him that money. But from the reporting I've seen, it looks like they're pretty set on Jaylen Brown. And listen, both Tatum and Brown are young, so people wanting to break them up so soon, I mean, I'm not really sure that's the case. I mean, they're still really young, right? We just don't see a lot of pairings like this where they were good, they were so successful so early. And now they've hit a few bumps in the road, so people want to break them up. I think Boston can still stick with them, and if you get a guy like Chris Paul in there, that would be nice, although I don't think Chris Paul wants to go to Boston. I think he wants to go to LA, because I feel like he thinks he can contend in LA, and he can be with his family. So I would like to see him on the Lakers. And that's really all, but that's really all I have to say about this Bradley Beal trade, because oh yeah, this is what I wanted to say as well. So Miami doesn't get Bradley Beal. So a report comes in. We're going to move on to Dame talk now, because this is what's actually, no, before we do that, I do want to talk about Kevin Durant, because Kevin Durant has basically formed a super team everywhere he's been. Oklahoma City was a little different because it was Westbrook. James Harden wasn't really James Harden yet, although he was really good. He was a sixth man, but those guys were drafted. He goes to Golden State because it was the best option to go to in free agency, even though it stacked the deck. I mean, that is what happened. It was the perfect fit for him to go. He wanted to be a part of it. All power to him. He goes to Brooklyn. He joins Kyrie. Brooklyn has a lot of assets to make a deal for a third star. They get James Harden in there. That flops incredibly, because Durant, not to say it was Durant's fault, it was definitely not his fault. But let's face it, we all know why that didn't work. You could blame Josiah. You could blame Sean Marks. I just told you that Nets roster, when they had the big three, it was good. All right, so you're going to crap on Sean Marks. I don't really know how you do that. Kyrie Irving didn't get the vaccine, didn't communicate it well with the team. James Harden wanted out. Broke up a lot of things. Kevin Durant saw chaos, took no accountability or no, basically blamed everybody else for stuff that Kyrie was doing. And it didn't work out. And he moved on from there eventually. And now he's in Phoenix. Monty Williams is fired, who won Coach of the Year when they had the 61 season. He did a really good job the year before that too. Was a crucial part in changing that Phoenix team and making them a winning squad. Monty Williams is fired all of a sudden when KD gets there. Chris Paul's gone. I don't know, man. Kevin, you better win with Phoenix now. Okay? It's like no excuses at this point. He said he made no decisions in the front office in Brooklyn. I'm sure that isn't entirely accurate. I'm sure he wanted James Harden on the Nets and pushed through for that. I'm sure he originally wanted Steve Nash as the coach or okayed it. I don't know for sure, but it all links back to that. And now he's gone from Brooklyn and he's in Phoenix, and a lot of stuff is happening in Phoenix where it's just things are shifting and changing. This team was in the finals 2-3 years ago. Or 2 years ago, right? Playing the Bucks. So, a lot of differences, a lot of changes. That's my thoughts on Kevin Durant quickly. But I want to get to Miami because Miami missed out on Bradley Beal. And ultimately, I think with Beal not going to Miami, they still have their picks. They still have Tyler Hero. So immediately people assume, oh, they're going all in for Dame. They're going all in for Dame Lillard. Portland can't find a trade for this pick. They shouldn't trade this pick anyway, but Portland cannot find a trade for this pick. Mark Stein and Chris Haynes recently said, listen, Portland looks like they can't find a suitor for this pick. Dame's not going to be happy with that. Dame's going to probably force out. Here's the thing. I explained this on a pretty long way. I explained this in the last episode. Miami does not have the best trade package. They just don't. Their first round picks, they're probably going to offer Portland 3 first round picks. I would think. Again, Pat Riley's pretty stingy. He may think Tyler Hero, 2 first round picks, this is enough for Damian Lillard. No. Portland, we'll get to Portland, what Portland wants briefly, but Miami can offer Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, maybe Caleb Martin, and 3 first round picks. Why would Portland take Miami's picks when Miami really hasn't been bad? I mean, considering they miss the playoffs every once in a while, but they've never been in the top 10 in the lottery. At least I don't remember. Maybe the year of Justice Winslow. Maybe. But they've always competed. They're always competed. They never bottom out. In the Pat Riley era, they just have not bottomed out. Sure, they've had disappointing seasons. Sure, they've had losing years. But they're never in, those picks that they have are never really good. So why would Portland take on Tyler Hero's big contract for a 6th-man shooting guard who doesn't play defense when they already have a guy very similar to that in Simons who's getting similar money, literally the exact same contract basically, and they're getting 3 picks from Miami who is good every year basically? Why would they take that trade? I'm not sure. Well, it doesn't matter. Where Dame wants to go. Here's the thing. And you look at the Las Vegas odds. I I think it's like minus 120 for Portland to keep him, which is crazy to me. To me, Dame is gone this summer, like no doubt about it. But Dame to Miami, like Miami's the runaway front runner to trade for Damian Lillard. Vegas is going with the trend. When Damian Lillard spoke on that podcast about trade suitors or trade destinations where he'd want to go, he mentioned the Miami Heat first, and he laughed. And I talked about this before. I'm pretty sure he was laughing just because the lifestyle in Miami, and obviously they're good. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Miami's not attractive. But he also said Brooklyn right after that. And you've seen so many media platforms, many social media, television debate shows, they have completely omitted the audio of Dame also saying Brooklyn. So this Miami quote that Dame said is spreading like a wildfire, really catching heat, pun intended. And Lillard has never made it clear that Miami's the number one. He mentioned Miami first, but he both said Brooklyn and Miami, and I'm quoting him, were both obvious destinations. And here's the thing. Brooklyn has a more enticing trade package than the Miami Heat. Portland wants to lose. Why do they want a Tyler Hero big-ass contract with the CBA coming in? They don't really want that. I would assume they would rather get cheap vets, younger players on younger contracts that they could flip for possibly more picks, along with better first-round picks. And Brooklyn possibly could be willing to part these Phoenix picks because it looks like Phoenix could be good in the next 2-3 years. Sure, possibly. Or it could possibly fail. I think many organizations around the league are looking at those Phoenix picks as very yummy right now, like very tasty, juicy. And I think Brooklyn will be willing to part with some of them. Remember, they have Phoenix's entire future right now. So they can trade like 3 of them and keep 2. And then they could also trade the Dallas first-round pick, which is also juicy. And they'd also still have some of their own first-round picks that they swap with Houston and some of their own first-round picks starting in 2028. So Brooklyn has a ton of draft picks and a ton of juicy draft picks. So they can offer Portland a way better package. And no one is talking about this really, except for a few people today, which I will give them credit for. Bill Simmons on his podcast recently talked about Brooklyn as a Dame trade destination and that it makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad people are finally coming to this realization. And you're probably thinking, oh, you're just a Brooklyn Nets fan. You want this to happen. Yes, of course I want this to happen. And listen, a lot of Nets fans don't want this to happen. But I'm just giving you the facts here. Miami's trade package. It's not just me saying this. Zach Lowe said it today. They could easily be outbid. Now, I don't know what Damian Lillard wants. Damian Lillard could easily want to go to Miami. That could be his number one choice. Right? It could be, could not be. Shams said recently on the Pat McAfee show today, some people are taking it and running with it as, oh, Miami, yep, Miami's that number one destination. Pat McAfee asked Shams, is Dame to Miami a foregone conclusion? So it was a Miami-based question, and Shams said, yes, absolutely, Miami's, well, he didn't say it was, he said, it's not a foregone conclusion. There will be other destinations, but Miami's on the top of that list. Top is very vague, I might add. That doesn't mean number one. I think most people know the top of that list considers are Brooklyn and Miami. Brooklyn and Miami. And Miami's package is just not that great to me if I'm rebuilding in Portland. It's just not that great. And you could say I'm biased. Tyler Hero is a young player who has like all-star potential, I guess, in the right situation possibly. He's played in big games. I'm not saying Tyler Hero is a scrub or anything, but he's on a big contract right now. And Portland could take it. We're like, okay, we'll take this guy on his big contract and we'll develop him. Sure, but they already have Anthony Simons. They're probably going to draft Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller, and they already have Shaedon Sharpe. So it doesn't make any sense to me why they would do that. Unless Dame is like, I only want to go to Miami, which he has said publicly that's not the case. He's basically said there are 2 places I would go to. Here's what I anticipate. Now, could Damian Lillard go to Miami? Absolutely. I'm not saying he won't. I'm not going to be shocked if Damian Lillard goes to Miami. But let's not act like they're the only team involved here, because they're not. They could easily be outbid. And you look at Brooklyn and what they have to offer or what they possibly could offer, and that could be more enticing. And Dame has said he would play there, for sure. He has said that. Mikal Bridges is his dog. He says it. These are quotes from him. I'm not making this up. Okay? So, here's what I expect with the whole Damian Lillard situation. I assume that Portland is going to pick on draft night. They will have conversations about Lillard going to, moving on, possibly moving on. They'll take calls from Brooklyn and Miami, I assume. And they're going to sit down with Damian Lillard, and they're going to be like, hey, listen, these are the offers we have. Let's discuss what's best for both sides. That's what I assume. And since those are 2 destinations Lillard has publicly said he would go to, he would choose it, and ultimately Portland would probably be like, listen, we like this package a lot, and that's what I assume what will happen. So if Dame says, I'll go to Miami, I want to win a championship with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, very possible. But also look at what Damian Lillard has said for years. He doesn't like the idea of joining a super team. That's what he would be doing in Miami. So he would look like a big hypocrite there. Moving on from a team that's going in a different direction, is different than joining a super team, which is what he would be doing in Miami. Brooklyn's a great fit for him, and he would be co-starring with Mikal Bridges. They have possibly more assets to improve that roster. That's also a really good fit. So to me, it's Brooklyn and Miami, and I think Brooklyn can offer the best package. However, I think it's 50-50 with these teams. I really do, because you're seeing a lot of Miami smoke out there, like Miami. Dame's going to Miami. Miami was just in the finals. I get it. Every media platform is talking about Dame to Miami, how great that would be with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. I get it. But do not ignore the team with easily the more assets just because they traded away Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving 3 months ago. They are not dead. Sean Marks does not have an extension. He's probably trying to win. Now, we can go into another day if it happens or not, if it's the smart way to go for Brooklyn. I personally think so, because I personally don't think, since they can't tank for the next few years, they should try to remain competitive, and trading Damian Lillard at least gives you a chance to be competitive, to improve off that roster in the future that you can. Damian Lillard's going to be 33 in October. I get it. That contract's going to look hideous in a few years. I get it. But he's coming off his best season. And that team is perfectly fitted for a guy like him. With all that length and defense, it's a good fit, and they're going to be a lot better than people think. So that's all I have to say about Damian Lillard. I'm kind of, I'm not going to really talk about Dame until something happens. But I've said all I've needed to say. Miami's package is just not good enough, in my opinion. And you could say I'm biased. Very well. I understand that. But I'm telling you right now, it makes no sense for Tyler Hero, because a lot of people are oversimplifying it. They're like, okay, Tyler Hero, good young player. That makes sense. Put him in a trade for Dame. You realize his contract stinks, and they also have Anthony Simons. Well, I'm not saying Tyler Hero's contract's terrible or anything, but it's not smart to have 2 guys on the same team being Simons and Tyler Hero when you're probably also going to develop Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller and Shaedon Sharpe. Doesn't make sense to have 2 guys who do the exact same thing in Simons and Tyler Hero at $20+ million a year. It doesn't make any sense. So that's just my opinion. You can, listen, if he goes to Miami, you can clown me all you want. I stand by what I say. But that's enough of the Dame talk. I don't think Miami's a lock for him. Next, we're going to talk about Zion. Because Zion is honestly been annoying me lately. When I saw Zion Williamson play college basketball, I was like, this guy's incredible. And obviously there were concerns about health, his weight. There was so much that summer that he was going to go to the Knicks because the Knicks had the worst record in the league that year. Again, media hyped it up. Zion to the Knicks. Knicks fans hyped it up. Zion to the Knicks. Zion goes to the Pelicans, which is a huge shocker, right? He goes to New Orleans. There's a lot of hope, but this guy just can't stay healthy. And not only can he not stay healthy, he seems to be getting bigger. He seems to not care about his weight. And let's face it, he probably doesn't want to be in New Orleans. And that's really unfortunate for the fans out there, because I think when that team is really going, they could bring a loud crowd over there. It's really fun. Ingram's been really good for them, right? They were the 2 seed when Zion was healthy. I don't know what's going on with Zion Williamson right now. He's my age. Like, he's a month older than me, I believe. So, dude's really young. You know, it's hard for me to judge a guy like him because we're the same age. Like, you know, he's having a lot of fun for a 22-year-old. But listen, man, get on the court and play. It's really that simple. And if I'm the Pelicans, normally I would say don't trade this guy, right? Because he is, like, his impact on the floor is too great at this point, and he's still so young that he can learn. So I think I would lean on the side of not trading him. But if New Orleans decides to cut bait and we're done with this guy, it's been so much drama in the last few years about him possibly not wanting to be here, his injury history, this whole situation with online with releasing the gender for his new baby, and the drama going on with porn stars coming out and saying what the hell and all that stuff. It's crazy. And I get it, he's young. Listen, we're seeing what happens with young players sometimes. Look at John Morant in Memphis. Like, I understand it. But ultimately, Zion's not playing. Say what you want about Ja, he's been playing. Right? He's getting suspended by the league. I get it. But when he's out there, he's playing. Zion's not playing. And it's unfair to the people in New Orleans because they have no shot at winning anything unless he plays. And he was out there in the playing game, dunking in warm-ups, didn't feel great. It's the bad luck. It's a bad look. Of course, he didn't end up playing. And then the Pelicans lose to the Thunder. And guess what? The West is kind of open. Like, if the Pelicans have a really good season, who's to say they can't make a run? That team has a lot of young talent. Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram, Zion, Valanciunas is a good fit. Willie Green, I think, is a good coach. Like, CJ McCollum, like, they got a lot of guys. So, if there's any interest in just getting rid of Zion and going after Scoot Henderson, a guy who looks like an absolute dog, a guy who, like, I would love to have on my team and build around, yeah, you would probably delay your rebuild for sure. Like, you wouldn't be contending right away because he's still a young player, but ultimately could work out easier for you in the long run because Zion's trade value right now is low. And who's to say it's going to get higher? Zion's at a difficult point right now in his career. I would say it's crucial, but I wouldn't say crucial yet because he got the big money. Right? This isn't a Ben Simmons situation where he's not playing games and then when he's out there, he looks terrible. Zion, when he's out there, looks amazing. I saw the dude play in person. He's literally a force to be reckoned with. He just dominated Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on opening day this year. Made Ben Simmons look like complete garbage defensively. He's just an unbelievable basketball player. And you could tell, like, there's so much more that he could be doing. He's just got to stay on the floor. And Charles Barkley has said this all the time. Listen, Moses Malone saved his career. When he was losing weight saved his career. And he's trying to do the same thing for Zion. Zion's got to surround himself with the right people and get on the court because in 3 years, I mean, who knows? If he's still playing an average of 25 games a year, who's going to sign him to another super lengthy contract like that? People fall in love with talent in this league. I get it. But Zion's got to have a year where he looks incredible at a consistent basis. And I don't think he will be traded this summer. But I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, we're at the point where, like, it's pretty noisy. Like, people are talking about it. I don't know what his market value is, honestly. I don't know what New Orleans would take for him. I don't know how much teams would give up for him. I'm sure he has some interest in, maybe Portland would trade that third pick and pair Lillard with Zion. That could be interesting. But I don't know. I just don't know. Speaking of the NBA draft, I expect we're going to see a lot of movement from picks 1 and 10. And I think you're seeing Dallas, they tanked to get that number 10 pick. Portland's obviously trying to move that pick. I don't think they will. There's rumbling Charlotte may move that pick. They're dealing with ownership changes and all that stuff. Who knows with them? Indiana doesn't seem interested in that number 7 pick. It really just seems like the only lock in this first lottery is San Antonio picking Victor. Now, if I have the number 2 pick, I'm picking Scoot Henderson. I have no interest in Brandon Miller, if I'm somebody. Listen, I'm not saying Brandon Miller can't be a good player. His skill set is obviously very interesting. And you could look at it, and you could look at him, and you could be like, wow, like, this guy, he's big, he could play make, he's unselfish, he could shoot threes. I just cannot unsee what I saw in the NCAA tournament. And there was a lot of drama with him. And, maybe it's unfair. But there's a lot of reporting from the interviews that people just like Scoot Henderson's interviews better and people just like him better. I think Charlotte would be stupid to take Brandon Miller with the 2nd pick. I don't care if you're drafting for fit. Pick Scoot Henderson, play him and LaMelo Ball, figure it out later. Whoever you believe in more, you could trade that guy for value. Draft the best player. And I'm just of the opinion Scoot Henderson's the best player between the two. And if he falls to Portland, Portland should trade Dame in a second. Draft Scoot Henderson, build around him. It looks like Charlotte is going to take Brandon Miller, although there's been some rumblings that Scoot Henderson is piquing their interest more and more as the day goes by. So we'll see what happens. I think that'll be interesting. Ultimately, I don't think Charlotte trades the pick. I don't think anybody in the top 3 trades their pick. I don't. I think Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller will either end up in Charlotte or Portland, and obviously Victor will be in San Antonio. As far as Dallas, that pick's gone for sure. They're trying to improve the roster, even if it's to get us somewhat of a good role player. I saw a proposed Indiana trade where Buddy Hield was sent to Dallas, and Toronto was involved as well, and OG Anunoby goes to Indiana. We'll see if that ends up happening. I don't know. Toronto seems to be very frustrating the way they handle OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam in trade talks. People seem to be sick of them. I think Masai Ujiri really overvalues how good those guys are. There's no way OG Anunoby's worth 3 first-round picks. He's just not. I think OG Anunoby's good. He's not worth 3 first-round picks. There's no star potential with OG Anunoby. Mikal Bridges proved for a month in Phoenix he could be a guy you could go to, and then he proved it in Brooklyn again. OG Anunoby, I don't see it. I just don't. So, that's probably another reason why Portland isn't trading for Pascal Siakam either. Maybe Masai Ujiri's declining the number 3 pick. I have no idea. I just don't. But there's going to be a lot of movement. You're going to see a lot of teams probably trading up. There's a lot of rumors that Brooklyn could trade up because I believe they have the 21st and 22nd round picks. They could trade up. I love Jordan Hawkins. That's a guy I love. I fell in love from what I saw in the national championship game and the whole tournament for UConn in general, how they blew out basically every team. And Jordan Hawkins was a guy I was obsessed with. He could be a great Joe Harris replacement, or he could be someone you could put in a Lillard trade. I have no idea. I think it's very possible Brooklyn can trade up. They can package those 2 firsts, 21 and 22, and get up higher possibly. And that could either help them in a Dame trade, it could either not, or maybe they could draft the guy and they could develop him themselves if they don't go for Dame, and they could just draft their own guys and build a team with depth and an interesting team to pair around Bridges and re-sign Cam Johnson, all that stuff. So I think those are teams to keep an eye on. So as far as the NBA draft goes, I typically am not as interested in the NBA draft unless it's a player that my team is picking. But I think this year will be very interesting because there's a lot of stakes here, because I have no idea where Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller are going. Portland ultimately has made it clear that they've wanted to trade this pick for something good. They're not getting anything good. So who knows? Maybe Damian Lillard's traded on draft night, because you have to assume they would probably tell him that night, listen, we're going to take this pick. You could assume Damian Lillard's not on the Blazers for another week after that. He could be traded the next day. Who knows? It's basically a confirmation if Dame's staying or going, I would think. If Portland if they make a trade or they, pick. We'll see what Charlotte does. We'll see if Zion Williamson stays. I'm assuming he does, but you never know. Where does Dallas improve the roster with? There's rumors that they're interested in Harrison Barnes, a reunion. I think that would be a good pickup for them if that's even possible. I haven't done enough research to see if that is possible, but I saw that there was interest. So the NBA draft, there should be a lot of movement. I think there's a lot of, from what I don't follow college basketball to a nail, so I don't know. I can't tell you specifically who I love in this draft so much. I'm just not that level of guy. I'd be lying to you if I told you I was an expert or anything. All I know is that I've seen some highlight tapes. I've seen some statistics of guys, and I've seen some players in big moments, and I'm judging them off that. So I understand Brandon Miller has a really good skill set. To me, I just can't unsee what I saw. Scoot Henderson went up against Victor Wembanyama and did really well. And that guy just looks like he wants it, and he wants to be great. So I would pick him if I'm Charlotte. And if you're Portland, you keep him and you trade Damian Lillard. So that's really all the NBA talk. A lot of NBA rumors. We'll see where certain guys go to. There's going to be a lot to talk about in the NBA offseason the coming weeks, next 2-3 weeks probably. But to end this podcast, I have to quickly rant on the New York baseball teams. The New York Mets hosted let's start with the Mets and then we'll go with the Yankees. The New York Mets hosted the St. Louis Cardinals, who for the first time since 1918, very well possibly they could finish with the worst record of the National League. This is a series. Pete Alonso's back. They said that he was going to be possibly out for 3 weeks. He's back after 11 days. The New York Mets have to get their acts together, because this is a series that they should have swept. They won the first game. Congratulations. The second game, Kodai Senga pitches. They're down 4-1. I believe it was 4-1. Make a brief little comeback, ultimately can't close the deal. Yesterday, they're scoring a lot of runs. But ultimately, that pitching. And I was watching that game, and seeing Adam Ottavino give up that home run in the top of the 9th inning, just the deflation of Citi Field. And not only that, to even break their hearts even more, Nimmo gets on base, and Starling Marte grounds into a double play, a weak grounder. And here's the story with the Mets this year, and why they're just so inconsistent, and why it's so baffling. And people want to blame Buck Showalter. Like, this guy was the manager of the year last year. And it's basically the same team. When are we going to get on these players? And you're going to see, I'm going to have something similar to say with the Yankees. We got to blame the players here. Listen, they're getting great production out of Alvarez. Pete Alonso's having a good year. Brandon Nimmo, after signing that big contract to play center field, he's having a really good year. He's been the most consistent Met this year, probably, because Pete's been injured. Right? Beatty, good third baseman. Right? About time they brought him up and replaced Escobar. But here's the thing. Jeff McNeil's been worse. Francisco Lindor has been significantly worse. The pitching just hasn't been as good as you thought it was going to be. And that bullpen is just god awful. Other than Rayleigh and David Robertson, Drew stinks. And then him getting suspended. Drew Smith gets suspended after the sticky stuff against the Yankees. Just embarrassing. Scherzer has to be better. And Scherzer looks like a shell of himself. There was that little moment after his suspension where he looked better. Verlander's been really inconsistent. Verlander pitched well against the Yankees recently. Scherzer didn't. Scherzer was looking good, and then he blew the lead. The pitching's been atrocious, been absolutely atrocious for the Mets. And on days where they do pitch well, they can't hit. But ultimately, the offense really hasn't been the biggest issue, at least as of late. But you're not getting good years out of Marte. You're not getting good years out of Vogelback. God, Daniel Vogelback is probably the most hated athlete in New York right now. I feel for him, but ultimately he's this big, beefy dude that has the body type that should be able to hit baseballs out of the park. He's not doing that. He's not swinging the bat. He had to take a mental week. You know, ultimately, what is Daniel Vogelback doing for you? He's not running the bases. He's not playing defense. He's not hitting. What is he doing for you? And I feel for the guy. He had moments last year where he showed off his power. He's been hitting a little bit better since he came back, but ultimately not great. Listen, Mark Hanna's a nice role player, I think. I mean, some Mets fans could do away with him. I think he's a nice role player for them. But ultimately, Scherzer and Verlander have to pitch better. They have to upgrade the bullpen. With no Edwin Diaz, I understand that was just a fluke thing that happened, and it sucks. But David Robertson's been really good for them this year, which is asking a lot for a guy who's 39 years old and has thrown a lot of pitches in his career at this point. Right? For a relief pitcher. So, ultimately, I mean, remember when Francisco Lindor a few days ago, I think it was the first game of the Cardinal series, bases loaded, no outs, basically does the worst thing imaginable, grounds out into a double play, comebacker weakly to the pitcher, gets the guy out at home, and then gets Lindor out at first. Thank God for Beatty, who brings in 2 runs after that. The Mets players have to be better. Steve Cohen has finally paid money and invested money into this team, which I think is all Mets fans want. I don't understand how you can blame Steve Cohen for stuff. And Buck Showalter, we're going to nitpick things for ultimately the players just not being that good. They're not showing up. They're not worth the money at this point. And they have to play better. Okay? They're still not out of it. The season's still not over. I think they're 33-38 right now. I think they're 5.5 games back from the wild card spot, the last wild card spot. I think the Dodgers are currently there right now. So, it's still possible. But there are only 3 teams in the National League right now. And one of them they just played, in the Cardinals, that have worse records than the Mets in the National League. Considering that this team won over 100 games last year. And are basically bringing back the same exact team. You can nitpick, you could blame Billy Epler, but Billy Epler was probably assuming, hey, I'm going to bring back the same team and we'll go try and get a bat at the deadline. You know, if you look at Jacob deGrom in Texas, he's injured. We don't want to give him that. Ultimately, deGrom didn't want to stay in New York. But we'll replace him with Verlander, who had a great year last year, even though he's old, So we'll get Scherzer, Verlander, bring in Kodai Senga. But, I mean, Chris Bassett's having a monster year in Toronto. Taijuan Walker was a nice addition for the Mets last year, right? And now he's gone. He's in Philly. So, ultimately, I look at the Mets, and I'm just like, just play better. The players got to play better. Okay? We could blame Billy Epler. You blame Buck Showalter for the manager things. The bullpen stinks, and the pitchers aren't pitching well. and the offensive players aren't hitting as well. Jeff McNeil is not a power hitter, and he's hitting around 270. It's not good enough. Players got to play better. And it's similar what I'm going to say about the Yankees. I like Aaron Boone as a manager. I do, personally. I like how feisty he is. I think he's a smart guy. Sure, you can nitpick him for some things. Sure, he's not perfect. But ultimately, I like Aaron Boone as the manager. And Cashman, I mean, people rip on Cashman all the time. These guys are supposed to hit. If the Yankees didn't bring back Rizzo, the fan base would have went nuts. Bader's been a good acquisition. Even though he hasn't been healthy consistently, he's a good acquisition. People would flip if they got rid of Stanton. I like Trevino as the catcher. People rip on him for Donaldson. I get it. Listen, Donaldson is ultimately not being... It's not a good move. It's not a good move. But DJ LeMahieu's not hitting. Glaber's a good option at second base. They're definitely not going to pay him in the offseason, but ultimately Glaber is not hitting great. Volpe, people would have flipped out if they didn't make him the shortstop on opening day, and Volpe it's taking him a while to adjust to the big leagues. All right, and Judge is hurt. All right, we get it. The offense should not fall apart this much after Judge gets hurt. But how about, instead of we blame Cashman for everything, let's start looking at the players. Josh Donaldson, where are you? Anthony Rizzo, I am the most disappointed in you. You start off the year hitting great. You're in the biggest slump of your whole MLB career. We need more out of a lot of these guys. All right? Because you look at the individual positions. I like Bader at center. I like Judge and right. I like Stanton as the DH. Right? If you look at the starting pitching, I know a lot of it's been injured, but Clark Schmidt's been pitching much better lately. And Domingo Germán has been pitching much better lately. I know both of them didn't have great series with against the Red Sox, but they have been pitching well lately. Carlos Rodon has not pitched a single thing for the Yankees this year. All right? Sevy's been bad this year, okay? But Severino ended last year really good. You're not going to just get rid of Severino. Okay? Cole's been a consistently great all season. You can get on him for Frankie Montas, fine, all right? Montas was pitching well in Oakland, got to the Yankees, probably had a shoulder injury, he's bad. And now he's out for the year, right? The Yankees bullpen, I like a lot of the bullpen arms. I mean, I love Jonathan Loáisiga, who's been out, but you got Ron Marinaccio, love him, love Wandy Peralta. Clay Holmes is pitching a lot better lately. I mean, I still ultimately think the Yankees will be fine, but they're not going to have Judge for a decent amount here now. The guy's got to step up. I mean, Cashman assumed that Rizzo would probably hit, right? You're going to get Bader back on Tuesday, so he was probably assuming Bader could hit, right? Hoping for a bounce-back year out of Donaldson. See what you got there. I mean, look at Hicks. Hicks in Baltimore, he was awful for the Yankees. He goes to Baltimore, now he's hitting. That's unfortunate, but that's Brian Cashman's fault, I guess. Everything's Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone's fault. The guys got to hit. And the fact that the Yankees have had so many injuries so far this year, and so many arms are out, and Aaron Judge has missed significant time, and Bader's missed significant time, and Stanton's missed significant time, and Rizzo hasn't really looked like himself for a while lately. The fact that the Yankees are as good as they are, and they're just outside that 6th wildcard spot as Houston just passed them, I think that's a big deal. I mean, look at Willie Calhoun and Jake Bauers and McKinney. Like, are we not going to give Cashman any credit for that? I mean, they've been playing pretty decent for them. They've been carrying a lot of the load. IKF as a utility guy has been really good for them. So ultimately, Josh Donaldson, who's just been hitting home runs basically, and has done nothing else, he's been an excellent third base defensive person. I'm calling out Josh Donaldson here because I had faith he could have a bounce back year. He is somebody that the Yankees could really use right now, that intensity, and just hit, because his defense is excellent at third. But he's not hitting, and he's making dumb decisions, getting picked off at first base. The players got to play better. I can't look at what the Yankees have done lately and be like, oh, Boone sucks and Cashman. Because ultimately, Rizzo is a guy I love, and he's not playing well. So when Rizzo's not hitting, if DJ LeMahieu's not hitting, if Stanton's not hitting, Judge isn't in the lineup, Bader's in the lineup, you're relying on guys like Glaber, Volpe, and Glaber's been one of the more consistent Yankees, although he has dumb plays like he did in that Red Sox series at home, where he just casually, the ball goes by him. And the pitching has been good despite so many injuries to Rodon and Sevy out for the beginning of the year. Nestor Cortez hasn't been around. I'm sorry, I'm not blaming Brian Cashman. I'm just not. I understand that it's been frustrating and the Yankees haven't been to the World Series since 2009 and people are sick of, and Yankee fans are sick of not being even to the World Series, and they don't care that the Yankees have basically had a winning record and have made the playoffs every year since 2009 minus 2 seasons or 3 seasons. I don't care, apparently. No one cares, apparently. I get it. People want Cashman gone. They're sick of Cashman. He's been there forever. I understand that. They need a change. That's what they all say. So, but I'm sorry. Players got to play better for the Yankees right now. I'm sorry. Players got to play better. We can evaluate things in the summer. You could look at the hard-nosed things. Did they really improve the team that much? Probably not. They still need a left fielder. But I'm sorry. I'm not blaming Cashman or Boone. Blame Cashman for the Donaldson trade, but I mean, Donaldson was an MVP 3 years ago. Or 4 years ago. Listen, I'm just saying Donaldson play better. All right? And listen, you'd be okay if Donaldson wasn't playing good and you had DJ LeMahieu playing good. That'd be different. DJ's not playing great. He looks washed. These guys got to play better. And listen, the deadline's coming. The Yankees and the Mets are going to make moves. There's no doubt about it, because the teams aren't as good as they thought they would be. But I think for the Yankees, there's definitely more hope, because they just have had so many injuries, and they're hoping that in September and October they can get hot at the right time. Guys can get healthy and guys can get rolling. I'm not sold on any American League team right now. I'm just not. Texas just lost Jacob deGrom. I understand they're really good. Right? Houston is always a threat, but they haven't looked great this year so far. And listen, last year, the Yankees at the beginning half of the year looked like the team to beat, and ultimately Houston overcame that. So it's a long-ass season. The Mets and the Yankees, I expect to both make the playoffs, even though the Mets are really not looking great. I mean, I do expect things to get better. But right now, it's a cluster. It really is. And I just had to quickly rant on it, because we're going to be talking a lot about NBA free agency, and it had to run into some of these New York baseball issues. It's getting bad, and New York fans are really sick of it right now. So that's today's episode of the JB Podcast. I thank you guys for listening. A lot of crazy stuff happened with the Bradley Beal trade. I'm so excited to talk more with you about the free agency. That's it for the podcast, though, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.